All right. We want to talk on the Pasha of the week, as we usually do. But since that today is also a very special day, as we all are aware of, so we are going to also point out certain aspects of the personality of the Rebbetzin that will illustrate the union of the Parsha. The Parsha is Ve'el HaMishpatim. It's an interesting thing that right after Matan Torah, the very first thing that is being described in the Torah at detail, Aseres HaDibur is the Ten Commandments. This includes the entire Torah, all the mitzvahs. But then when it came down to detailing, the first things that are presented is Mishpatim, Eila HaMishpatim. And as Rashi points out, there is a Vav, Ve'eila HaMishpatim. Ve'eila HaMishpatim in Lashon Kodesh, as you know, connects. Ve'eila means and these are the laws, which means it connects. It's a continuum from the previous parsha, in the Aseres HaDibros. You know that Mishpatim are those categories of mitzvahs that are what we call civil laws. And essentially these are laws that lend themselves readily for us to understand. These are laws that are within human grasp. Not only human grasp, but they're basically in accordance also with human thought, with human intelligence. It doesn't necessarily mean that every mishpat, every law that the Torah presents, will be exactly conforming with the way we think. But it's clear that every human being understands that mishpatim are a necessity. There must be mishpatim. And the Gemara describes mishpatim, that these are those laws that were it not for if the Torah were not given, Chas v'Sholom, we would have figured them out. Not exactly the way the Torah teaches us, but we would have construed various laws from various observations, from things that we see in the world. We would have figured out many things. And these mishpatim, which seem to be the simplest and the most obvious thing to human thought, are the very first things that the Torah presents in terms of Allah. In other words, we would think that the Torah would present the first thing, something which is distant from our thought, something that people would have difficulty with, something that we would not think of. Mishpatim leave it to the end because we would know them anyway. No. The first thing the Torah presents is Mishpatim. And in addition to that, the expression in the Pasuk is Ve'eila HaMishpatim asher tosim lifneihem. So you learn the Rashi, asher tosim lifneihem, that it means That Hashem tells Moshe, you have to present it. You have to present it to them, not just tell them the law, but present it to them in a way that they have a full grasp and full understanding of it. And if we go a step deeper than that, the Alter Rebbe says in the Torah, Asher tosim lifneiam, lifneiam means lipnimiyusam. You have to bring it to them in such a way that they not only know it and understand it, but that they relate to them bipnimius. Bipnimius means from their neshama, from their souls. That they can relate to them from their souls. I want to discuss the principle of these laws, of the civil laws, that we can view them at three levels, three different perspectives. As a matter of fact, in the Hayom Yom today, which I'm sure you read, the Rebbe says that there are two types of laws. Laws that make life and laws that life makes. You remember that? The laws that are created in any society, in a civil group, the laws are the result of experience that people have. And by virtue of their experience, and they see where things need to be corrected, they enact laws to guide the society. The laws of the Torah are different. Even the laws of Mishpatim, these are not laws that result from life. These are laws that make life, that bring life out. And this is what the Alter Rebbe says, that there is pnimiyusam, that even the simple civil laws relate directly to the neshama of a Yid. I said I want to discuss this principle that we can understand them at three different levels. There are civil laws that are necessary in order to protect society so that people can live close by together without hurting one another, without disrupting their peace. There have to be laws for that. If a person robs somebody, takes someone else's property, we need a law that protects the property. Because if there isn't a law that protects the property, then people will constantly overstep each other's boundaries. And there's not going to be peace. There's going to be a disrupted life. People have to have a certain degree of confidence and security and assuredness that that which is mine is not going to be usurped by somebody else. And this is what the laws are about. And along with these laws, we need shoftim and shotrim. Along with these laws, we also need guards. We need police officers that can follow through and follow through under the decree of the law. So these laws at that level, this is what we call superimposed, externally imposed on a person. It's nothing to do with the human being. It has to do with the circumstance. Anytime, just like we're sitting here, there are many people around the table. Every person has to have his place. And if people begin to take each other's place, and people don't know how to cooperate, then they're not going to be able to do what they need to do. This is essentially what laws are. At a higher level, as we discussed many times, rules of behavior, proper behavior and improper behavior, is really a principle of human intellect. Every human being, by virtue of his intellect, his seichel, tells him that there is a proper way to behave and an improper way to behave. We spoke many times, and I want to bring this up at this point again, that the human being is in a category totally remote, separate, above everything else in the world. The animals, lahavdil, also have mode of behavior, how they behave among themselves. But that has no aspect, no human aspect to it. The human mode of behavior is in a category completely by itself. No similarity whatsoever. Huh? There is no similarity whatsoever. And what is in fact the difference? The difference is not merely in how they behave. Because in terms of how they behave, you can find many similarities. The difference is that the animal behaves however it behaves instinctively, which means the animal does not have the sense of appreciating the value and the significance of that behavior. He behaves in a certain way because that's the way the Rebbe Hashem made it to behave. The human being, any one of his behaviors, this is something which he evaluates and he absorbs in his intellect. And he truly understands and sees the value of that behavior. And thus, human behavior is representative of the fact that he is a human being. It is not merely that it is advantageous and that this will facilitate advancement, social advancement. Facilitate? Huh? Facilitate? And make possible. But this, in fact, represents the human being. In the Gemara says that if the Torah were not given, as for Sholem, we would learn certain qualities, certain aspects from animals. That's what the Gemara says. We have to stop and think about this. What do you mean we would learn from animals? And the Gemara gives examples. Gemara says we would learn sneus. We would learn from a cat. We would learn respect for other people's properties. Gneva, we would learn from an ant. An ant. Amurashka.
They don't steal.
What do you mean they don't steal? They
Stop?
Well, how do you learn that? I saw it in the Sikha and I thought we learned stealing from the ant.
No.
Like, don't behave like the ant.
No.
Because it looks like he's stealing food all day.
No. They go, they don't take from each other. They go and they build their own nest.
Ah.
And I would like that we should think about this for a moment. Here is a human being, and we say that he is the supreme being in this world. He's the highest being there is. And yet, he would not know fundamental modes of behavior. He would have to learn it from the animal. Why does he need to learn it? If he understands it, he doesn't need to learn it. And the explanation is in line with what we mentioned before. The animal has a natural instinct for certain things. The cat does not appreciate that it has a quality of tznius. This is its mode of behavior. The human being does not behave instinctively. The human being, for him to behave at any level, he has to first be confronted with it, recognize it, evaluate it in his seichel, and identify it as something good and true and valuable, and then he adapts his mode of behavior. He cannot behave instinctively. Seichel, and here's the thing which I'd like you to understand. Seichel does not have a limited path. That this is the way it is, just like an instinctive reaction of an animal. Seichel has a much higher root, much higher base. The higher base, we can define it as respect, sense of truth, sense of goodness. And this higher base can express itself in all kinds of different ways. There is no narrow path. This is what the Gemara says. Ein de'esehem shavis. No two people will think alike. Even though they live in the same world, and they have, and deep down in the neshamas, they have holy neshamas. But when it comes down to days, they all have different experiences and have different ways of doing things. Ain't they same shabbos?
It comes down to what? Experience. Is that what you say? Is that experience?
The seichel is formed by experiences.
I didn't understand the word.
Why? Just 1 second. We discussed another time, if you would recall, the phenomenon of the fact that a baby, a human baby, it takes a year before it can stand up and walk. And lahavdil, an animal, a horse, a half hour after it's wrapped, it runs around. Is that because the horse is advanced over the human baby? No, it's not at all. It's not an indication of advance. It's just, what this is telling us is the horse, when it's running around, it's instinctive. It doesn't know the significance of movement, significance of running around. The baby, before it can do anything, it has to process everything intellectually. He has to understand and be able to relate to it, and on an intellectual level. And that's why it takes a year before the baby grows up intellectually to the point where it realizes, I really want to walk. First it starts crawling. First it starts turning over and crawling and doing all kinds of different things until it realizes it and begins to understand what it means to walk. And only then it begins to learn how to walk. Because a human being has to process everything with intellect. Because a human being has to know what he is doing. To him it has to be a right thing. Because everything that a human being does has to be rooted, has to relate back to his neshama, to his nefesh. Why does a human being walk? Because he is a human being. Why does he talk? Because he's a human being. Why does he not rob or steal?
Because he's Jewish.
Because he's a human being. All of these things reflect the essential quality of what this person is. It's all rooted back into the value of life, the significance of his life. Why does he learn? Why does he grow intellectually and emotionally? All rooted back into the essence of the person. At one time, we discussed this principle at a very low level, fundamental level, but it's something that I like to do because it makes things very clear. People are standing on a subway train, on a subway platform, and the train comes up and opens the doors. And you will see there are people who, on the platform, as soon as the doors open, they walk right in. The fact that our people have to come out, so we'll clash. I'm going my way. There are people who stand on the side, let the people off, and then they go in. Now, practically speaking, it's a logical thing to do. Wait until people come off, and then go in. It's a practical thing. But really, there's more than just a practical thing. It's just the right way to do it. A human being does things the right way. It's a respectful way to do it. Anything that's the right way, that is automatically what a human being chooses to do. It's not just because it's practical, it's advantageous, but because it's right. And the human being feels there's a human quality in him that tells him, do it the right way, don't do it the wrong way. And if he does it the wrong way, he realizes that he has embarrassed, so to speak, his human quality. He's being disrespectful to his human quality. Yeah, he got it, but it's nothing. He got it the same way like a cat gets its thing. We spoke one time, and I pointed out, the Mishnah says Im ein derech eretz ein Torah.
What?
Derech eretz. Ein Torah. So it means several things, many things. And we also say derech eretz kodmu leTorah. Why is derech eretz so important? Because in order to understand Torah, we first have to understand who we are. We can only understand Torah after we recognize that we are human beings. If we do not have the sense of the human quality, of the human nefesh, then anything we learn in Torah will just be like sticking something from outside that don't belong there. It can be superimposed. Because only a human being understands that there is right and wrong. There is good and bad. And if a human being is sensitive to it, in order to understand Torah, one has to be sensitive to the principles of Torah before he starts learning about it. And therefore, we understand, from this perspective, we understand why is it that Mishpatim is the very first thing that the Torah talks about, after Matan Torah. Because this, in fact, is the prerequisite for being able to understand everything else. But then, you want a question?
So if knowing Mishpatim, right, and being like a human being is the first thing in Torah, because you have to be a human being to understand Torah, then how can we have individuals like Reish Lakish, who didn't do all the Mishpatim laws, and they were like thieves and robbers, and then they became these great, Torah scholars? What drew them to Torah then? If they weren't like people.
Okay, save that question. Don't forget it.
Okay.
But then there is an other step to this. This will only explain why it says in Mishpatim the first thing after Matan Torah. But then there is another thing. We said Ve'elah HaMishpat. Ve'elah HaMishpatim means not only a Mishpatim like a prerequisite for Torah, but Mishpatim actually are derived from Torah. They represent Torah. Just as we understood in this brief discussion that human proper behavior is not merely practical and advantageous pragmatically.
What is pragmatically?
Practically.
Practically.
But that this is something which represents the human being, and it's rooted in the very soul of the human being. We will understand on a higher level that really ultimately this quality, this principle, is really rooted, is really connected and related not just to the human being, but related to Hashem. The human quality, the seichel, this is like an intermediate stage. To give us a little grasp on this principle, Chassidus explains that there are 3 levels in Seichel, which we mentioned many times. There are 3 levels in Seichel. There's Seichel Bahami, then there's Seichel Anushi, and then there's Seichel Aleki. Seichel Bahami, this is the big problem in today's world. People going around without heads. Oh, behemoths! Oh, look, they are smart. Animals have smarts. And what's the difference between an animal and a human being? So you have to understand there's a Seichel Bahami. And the human being also has Seichel Bahami. What's Seichel Bahami? Seichel Bahami is the Seichel that tells you what is more advantageous, which way, what food you like best, and what's more comfortable. How are you going to get the best of a certain situation? Above that, this is what we said before, the practical advantages. That people shouldn't clash. People should live in peace with one another without fighting each other. For this you need Seichel Bahami. You have to know how to organize things that people don't step on each other's toes. Then above that there is Seichel Anushi. Seichel Anushi, this is what gives us, what we discussed before, at the human level. Where it's not just a question of not clashing and not fighting, but it's a question of recognizing that there is a right and a wrong. And if it's wrong, I as a human being don't want to go there. Even if it's advantageous. Even if nobody is going to get hurt. It's just not the right way to behave. Above that, there is Seichel Aleki. Seichel Aleki is clearly in a category by itself. And perhaps it could be said there is a greater distance between Seichel Aleki and Seichel Anushi than between Seichel Anushi and Seichel Bahami.
Seichel Nushi, the idea that you spoke before about the heads, this applies to every human being, right? It's not only a Jewish person. Everyone can relate to doing the right thing beyond what I can get, right?
Right.
He's asking what's the meaning of the Bahamas, the first Seichel, Seichel Bahamas.
Correlation with such a thing is good or it's not good. How much are we in relation with this or are we not related? Is it with the feels like the understanding? How is the concept?
Seichel Bahami, at the highest level, which is the way the human being has it. Okay, there's the Behemah, the human being. It is the way to be able to set up, to organize a worldly physical situation. For instance, you figure out how to go from here to 770. Right? You look at the streets and you figure out this way. Do you realize, you know that a cat or a dog can also find its way back to its house. So it doesn't need much wisdom for this. It's a practical thing. You can also figure its way out. As a matter of fact, through smell or whatever it is, they can find their way miles and miles away. I once mentioned that I remember years ago there was a Yid, an elderly person, a loner. He lived alone. His place was on one of the benches on Eastern Parkway. A Yid, and apparently he was an educated person, but someplace his life kind of got disrupted. He had this little dog that he used to walk around with. This was his companion. And so one time I was standing there and he demonstrated what he trained the dog to do. This dog he trained to do simple arithmetic. Yeah. He'd tell the dog, says 3 and 2, and the dog would bark out 5 times. All right.
I need a calculator for that.
So, in other words, to bark out 3 times and then bark out 2 times, which totals 5 times, doesn't need much wisdom. The dog can do it. So clearly, human seichel is on a different level. The fact that a human being is able to conceptualize. You understand what conceptualize means? Conceptualize means that it's not a question of what more advantageous. There are no clear-cut reasons why you do things one way or another. It's a concept. It's a human concept. This is right. This is respectful. This is correct. Where the seichel itself, the human seichel itself, defines the situation rather than figuring out my way around it. Okay, there is much to speak about it. This is not the first time I speak, so I don't want to go into all the great details. I want to go to the next step. The Seichel Eliki, which is what Torah is. And this is the meaning of that Vov in the Eila HaMishpatim. Just as we understand, like we said before, the difference between the instinctive action of an animal and the intellectual action of a person, where he actually conceptualizes and recognizes right from wrong, there's another level. And the other level is, when you talk about a human being, you say this is right for the human being, and this is wrong for the human being. You're talking about an existing entity.
What is entity?
Entity means something that exists, a present thing, present world exists. How come the human being exists? Where does he come from? And what's his purpose? That's immaterial. He's here. He's here. It doesn't. There is no question in terms of what does he stand for. How come there is a human being? A Seichel Eliki goes a step further. Seichel Eliki goes and says, not just what exists, but why does it exist? Where is it coming from? What gives it its real purpose and its real value? This is the significance of the fact that in the Aseres HaDibros themselves, as we mention all the time, the Aseres HaDibros, the first Aseres Dibros are Oloiche Hashem Alekecha, speak about the highest and the deepest truths that exist, that Hashem created everything, and Hashem made us into a nation, and then at the end it speaks about don't rob and don't steal. Because ultimately what the Torah is telling us is not just to behave nicely humanly, but to utilize and to understand that proper human behavior actually is representing not just the human being, but representing Hashem's presence in the world.
So it's different materials.
I'm sorry?
The Sechel Enoshi thinking about this existence, this world, but Sechel Eloki is different existence. It's the existence.
Seichel Elokei is saying that this existence here comes from Elokus.
It's not real.
It's not an existence by itself, it represents Elokus. Just as in a person's actions, it's not just the action, it's the idea behind the action. Seichel Anushu. The same thing on a higher level, it's not the human idea, it's the godly idea. And the godly idea, this is what gives it real value. And this is the Pshat V'yeila HaMishpatim, that the Mishpatim are connected back to the Aseres HaDibros. It's not just laws that are proper humanly, but that the human being's behavior, a Yid's behavior, simple behavior, is really representative of Hashem's presence in the world. Very simple, decent behavior, the way the Torah directs.
When you say Hashem's presence, which presence is it? It's not the Shekhinah, it's something else, right?
Hashem's presence means that everything that exists has been created by Hashem and represents His principles, His truths.
So in this case, Hashem's presence, as in Hashem, being the master of the universe.
Right. Like if you don't steal, yes, it's insulting for the human being to steal. But what is the real ultimate meaning behind it? That if you steal, you are denying Hashem's presence in the world. Because if this property is now his, it is his not by accident, it is his not by some kind of just a physical situation. Everything, this is his because it's truly his. And in order for it to become yours, it has to go through a process, a proper process to transfer hands. And if it doesn't go through a proper process, you're breaking the rules of God's world. I want that we should understand that proper, respectful human behavior on the simplest, on the most sophisticated level, how we eat. In Shulchan Aruch, in Halacha, there is what's called Hilchis Derech Eretz. There's a whole Mesichta called Mesichta Derech Eretz. What's a Mesichta? Derech Eretz?
Mesicha.
A Mesichta.
Ah.
Masechta Katanis.
Derech Eretz. And there you see in the Shulchan Aruch it's brought down how you're supposed to eat. How big a piece of bread you should break off to eat. How you're supposed to sit. How you're supposed to and not stuff your mouth and take one bite at a time. Simple things. You have to understand, these are things which represent, which attest, which say that there is Hashem's presence in the world. And because there's Hashem's presence in the world, this is why there's a rule, there's a proper way to eat, a respectful way to eat. It's not just respecting the human being, it's respecting Hashem's presence in the world. This is the Ve'ela HaMishpatim. I said that I want to mention about the Rebbetzin. The Rebbetzin was the most sneezike person, the most modest. She never ventured out. You would never see her in a way that she should be recognized. Oh, this is the Lubavitcher Rebbetzin. She was most of the time in her house, and when she went out quietly, without any fanfare. The Rebbetzin was a very educated, highly educated person in every aspect. Secularly, she had a degree, I think, also from Sorbonne, if I'm not mistaken. And she was highly educated in Torah. And she was an extremely wise and smart person. Her behavior was always on the simplest level. She was always greet a person warmly, welcome a person in a very kind and welcoming manner. So you would say, oh, this is a good, decent individual. But if you thought a little closer, and you observed a little closer, you would see that each one, every step, and every aspect of that behavior represented really what we call royalty with godliness. It was not merely self-respect. It wasn't just a human sophistication. It was respect for the truth of what the world stood for. It was respect for every individual person. And the respect was because this individual person has a neshama, has a godly neshama. You couldn't tell. It was a completely mishpatim, completely simple. On the simplest level, no sophistication. And yet, it represented the inyan of Ve'ela HaMishpatim, represented the godly presence in every move, in every aspect of life. We know, we would think that Rebbetzin was a quiet person behind the scenes. When the Rebbe was debating whether or not he should undertake the task of becoming a Rebbe, which the Rebbe didn't want. He had plenty of things to do before that, and he really didn't want it. For whatever reason, he was very shy of doing it. Many Chassidim came to the Rebbe, begged him, tried to convince him from various aspects. The Rebbetzin, who lived in this modest life with the Rebbe for all these years, clearly, for her, this would be the greatest sacrifice. It would mean that she would not have any companionship. That was it. And as it is being told that the Rebbetzin is the one who convinced the Rebbe to take on the Rebbetzin. Because she said, what is going to become of my father's chassidim, father's work, if you don't take it. And this was done quiet, simple, and it seemed almost simply logical. But in this lay the most deepest recognition of what life is all about. If we should take note, if we should take a lesson, not a lesson, if we should take advantage of the blessing of knowing and having a connection to this unusual, beautiful person, we would reflect to ourselves this inyan that we discussed, that every individual person, every Yid, in normal behavior, very simple thing, getting up in the morning, washing Negelwasser, going and greeting a friend in a nice way, getting dressed modestly and mitzniiznik, coming down and keeping whatever is keeping respect for property and respect for how you eat and how you behave. Every little thing is a reflection of Anochi Hashem Elokecha. On a deeper down, on deeper level, that's what it reflects. This is what Ve'ela HaMishpat. This is what the Alter Rebbe says. Alter Rebbe says, Asher tosim lifneihem. They should put lifneim in front of them. So Rashi says, he should prepare to them like a Shulchan Aruch, right? You remember that, Rashi? A Shulchan Aruch that is prepared for human consumption. The Alter Rebbe says a deeper union, a Bechsidus, that it has to go lipnimius, and it has to go into very pnimis, in the very essence of the person. And the essence of the person is a nefesh elokis, his godly soul. It is important that we understand that our human quality, but our Jewish quality, our holy quality, is expressed not only in learning and davening. As a matter of fact, learning and davening come after. If we behave in a holy way, under normal circumstances, that is conducive, that helps us to come to learn and daven. So that there isn't that dichotomy, we're not in two different worlds. Every single simple activity that we do and we stop ourselves, wait a second, is this the right way to do it? Should I scream across the room or should I walk over and talk to him? Just this simple thing. There's somebody across the room and I have to tell him something. Hey, Yanko! In the meantime, people are sitting here and learning. And hey, Yanko! Hey, the heck, let him go back to their learning. The simple thing that says that you don't scream across the room. This is not self-respect. I explained one time a whole talk. Self-respect in Yiddishkeit, in Torah, is respect for the Meibusha. It's respect for the fact that what are you standing for? What are you here for? That's what self-respect is. And each one of these things, everything in human life, in Yiddish life, is always a reflection and a spark from from the nefesh Elokis, from the godly soul, and from the seichel Eloki, from the recognition of Hashem's presence. With this approach and this practice, one will not feel that he's in two different worlds. When he eats, he's in one world. When he walks in the street, he's in another world. And when he learns, he's in a different world. Yes, there's differences in what he does, clearly. He's engaging his seichel or not. But he is essentially recognizing the truth of where he is and what he stands for. Just want to mention at the end, since you're still relatively young, some of you, but I speak to people, I speak to couples, all kinds of different issues, and one time I was on the phone with someone. He was at home, and he wanted to tell something to his wife, and he screamed across the whole house. I don't know where she was. And I spoke to him. I realized he simply never heard. He doesn't know the difference. Doesn't know the difference. People coming from the world don't know the difference. Don't know what it means that you have to be respectful. Not for yourself, but respectful for the Meibush. In a Jewish home, you don't scream. If you want to say something, you have to walk over and talk. You're not alone. The Rebbe is always there, like we learn in Shulchan Aruch. You have to have tznius all over, no matter where you are. Reflecting on this, I'm sure that this will help each one of us to bring out the best in us and to be able to relate to Torah life much more completely, rather than just doing something because I have to do it, but to have a personal relationship to it and understand this is the reality of life. This is not something that's being forced, being superimposed on us. This is something where we actually belong. And if we have Ve'ela HaMishpatim, that simple Mishpatim we relate back to Onoichi Hashem Elokecha, then we'll be able to understand all other aspects of Torah. From Chukim and Mishpatim, Chukim and Eidos and everything. And you know something? I'll tell you a secret. We will be able to develop common sense. We have a world that is in poverty of common sense. Common sense. Why? Why are we short of common sense? Because we don't have a basis for it. Why should I? I'll just go and do what I need to do. Why is there such a thing as common sense? Why does it have to be a sense? Why does it have to be right and wrong? What does respect have to do with anything? Common sense is also based on Onoichi Hashem Elokecha. If this is a wild world, there's no common sense. There's common sense only if this world belongs to Hashem. Hashem should help each one of us to rise up, to grow up, and get a sense of our own intelligence, and get a sense of our own refinement, our own edelkeit, our own finesse, our own neshomas, which will open up our minds and hearts to be able to understand Torah, understand Yiddishkeit, and ultimately lead us to a successful and a happy life. And ultimately lead the whole world to Mashiach.
Amen.